We're so excited to have author J.E. Neal with us today. J.E. Neal also goes by Jillian, so we're going to call her Jillian today. Jillian writes sexy urban fantasy, fantasy romance, really fantasy and romance in every different permutation, and it's all addictive. So her Energy of Magic series is now complete. It's 9 books, and they move one into the other. So you can binge right on through. She has another series, Tangle of Magic, that's going to be coming this summer in the same world. So another round of books with these really interesting characters, and then even more on tap. So we're really, really excited to talk today with Jillian. Jillian, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's talk about these books. You have so many books. And I'd love to know where should I start?
If you're reading, I would start with the first Energy of Magic book, which is Shield and Shattered Cages. Rainer Lawson is the initial narrator, and so he introduces the world as he learns about the world. Later on, there will probably be a couple of other books that would be good interest, but they're not out yet.
So what can you tell me about this series? What is this world like?
So it is set very much in a world like our own. You've heard of all the places, everywhere that they travel, you can travel yourself. But my characters have the ability to summon and harness energy from around them and from the earth and bend it to their will to some degree. So that allows a lot of really cool things that they can do. And one of my favorite parts is that because emotion can become energy, you can physically see frustration or desire or whatever, or the characters can see it and summon from it. So that's one of my favorite parts of writing it.
I can see why. So what about these characters? Who am I going to meet in Shield and Shattered Cages?
So Rainer Lawson is, like I said, the initial introducer of the world. He is just graduating from what would be college for us, and starting his career in IADEX, which is the Gifted Police Force Special Ops kind of unit. And you meet his childhood sweetheart, Emily Haydenshire, and her very large family, with whom Rainer lives, as his father was assassinated prior to the series starting. And he goes to work for Dan Vendigo, who runs IADEX. And Dan has a pretty tragic backstory. And actually, when I started writing, when Rainer started talking in my head, Dan was the person he told me about first. But Dan was not in a place where he was ready to talk to me yet. So Rainer introduces us to the world, and then we switch to Dan's perspective in the middle of the series.
So I know that these are also romances. So can you tell me about Rainer's love interest?
So the story is that Emily Haydenshire dared Rainer to kiss her when she was 7 years old. And that from that moment on, he was 100% in love with Emily. Emily is, she is the perfect counterpart to Rainer, I think. Emily is a receiver, which means that she can feel emotional energy and summon from emotional energy. She can, with the touch of her hand, take away emotions that you may not want to feel. She can emotionally heal people, and Rainer also has a tragic backstory, and both of his parents were murdered. So that element of Emily's magic certainly is appealing. She is a Spitfire in every sense of the word, and he loves that. But yeah, Emily at the end of their college career goes and plays professional summation, which we'll talk about, but the gifted games of the world. But yeah, Emily is Rainer would not be Rainer if it weren't for Emily, which I think is how great relationships are. So,
are there any other couples I should start shipping as soon as I start reading the series?
Rainer's best friend Logan Haydenshire is Emily's big brother. Logan and Rainer were born 2 days apart. Their families were very close, so Logan and Rainer literally grew up together. Logan is very much in love with Adeline Parker. Adeline's mother was not gifted, and she was unaware that Adeline was born gifted. And that's a pretty big part of the story, is Adeline discovering her gifts and what to do with them. But yeah, Adeline is a gifted healer. She can repair wounds. She can, all the things that they're able to do. And she's exceptionally strong, which makes everyone very curious as to her parentage, because she does not know her father. And like I said, she's very, very strong, and her mother is not gifted, which means that all of her gifts came from her father's line. So we do discover her father throughout the series, but that takes a little while. But Logan is very, very much in love with Adeline. Dan will meet his counterpart in the middle of the series, and she heals him as well.
How did you discover romance books? Like, what drew you to romance?
Okay, so my grandmother taught me to read when I was 4, like the flashcard method. So I have been a reader for as long as one can read, I guess. Books I was always reading my whole childhood. Authors to me were like, almost godlike creatures. I loved them so much. But I think we were in 7th grade, may have been 8th, but a friend of mine had snuck out a couple of romance novels from her mom's stash. And we were studying ancient Rome in world history. And I was really bored with ancient Rome. In 7th grade, they don't tell you all of the really cool things that were going on. So it was just a very dry sort of thing. And in our discussion of our boredom, she hands me one of the books that she got from her mom. And it was Robin Lee Hatcher's The Magic, which I think Robin Lee still writes, but it may be in a different genre, I'm not sure. And so I stuck this, and this book actually have a copy here. It has this pirate couple in the clutch, right? And this looked very fascinating to me, because this was going to be good. So I put it in my textbook and devoured this book. And I think I was pretty much sold from then on. But the cool thing about me having this book is it was her mom's, and so she had to get it back into the stash, so I had to give it back to her. And it was not one that was on the shelves at the time that I read it. Her mom had it for a while. But I told my husband about this book. I talked about, this was the first book, a romance novel I'd ever read. And so the day that my first book came out, which was probably 12 years ago, my husband got me a copy of it. He found a copy of The Magic and gave it to me, which was very, very sweet. But yeah, no, I have loved romance since I was about 13, 12 or 13. So.
Does that book have a special place in your house?
It's in a book stand on my bookshelf in my office. Yes.
So that was your gateway.
Mm-hmm.
What were there any series that brought you into more of the fantasy romance in the last decade or so?
I read and loved Harry Potter. I read and devoured Twilight. Love Nalini Singh's Side Changelings. tend to really gravitate to series that did the same thing that I do in the realm, which is it's our world, but just a little bit different. I love that what if question. What if things weren't the way that they appear? What if there's something else at play that we are unaware of? So any series like that, I usually really, really enjoy. So those were probably the first fantasy series I really read. I was always like a huge Star Trek fan though, so I watched it more than I read it as a kid.
Okay, so like, is there any like sexy fanfic in your background?
As a kid, I was obsessed with Deanna Troi and Will Riker from Next Generation, obsessed. And the writers on the show kept making Riker like be this kind of playboy guy, and Deanna she started dating Worf, and I was furious that the writers had done this. And I was old enough that I was aware, like it was like some kind of divide in my head, that I was aware the writers were making them do this, but not aware that these were actors that probably weren't really in love in real life. Like I think they're both married to other people and stuff. So I would like rectify what I felt the wrongs that the writers had done with Deanna and Will. And actually, we just watched Picard, and the third series, they bring back the original Next Generation crew, which was so cool. But in the Will and Deanna did an interview with Will Wheaton in one of the after shows, and Jonathan Frakes said that they had decided together way back in the day that every time they were on screen together, they were going to behave like they were in love, even if that's not what the writers had really wanted for the scene. That's what they felt the characters, that's how they would behave. And so I felt so justified in my
Validation.
my desire to put them together. So I definitely used a lot of notebook space. I'm making up stories for Riker and Troy. I think I wrote some Zach and Kelly from Saved by the Bell. But remember, like at the time and the age that I was doing this, I didn't know what fan fiction was. Like that was not a word I knew. So to me, I was just like correcting obvious mistakes to me. I have no idea where they are now. No idea, but
but like you should find them.
They either got thrown away or my dad's basement flooded about a decade ago, and I have a feeling if anywhere left, that's where they were. So unfortunately, they are gone.
Saying you will not be releasing.
We will not be releasing that fan fiction.
Scripts.
Paramount may not appreciate that.
Okay, well, since we can't read your Riker Troy fanfic, which of your Energy of Magic couples has the most like Will Deanna energy?
So definitely Dan and Fiona. To the point that for the first half of the series, Dan is a playboy just like Riker was. But yeah, he meets Fiona in book 4, I believe, 4 or 5. They're all one long continuous story to me, so I sometimes miss the book, but and that is life-changing for Dan. So, but definitely Dan Vendigo and Fiona Styler, 100%.
Okay. So you talked about, you've been a reader since you were 4. Were you always a writer?
See, like, remember that writers to me were these like celestial beings. I never ever would have put myself in the category of an author. In fact, when I started writing The Realm, I still didn't think of myself as an author. It was just the story I was getting out of my head, but there have always been stories in my mind constantly. Like My Little Ponies had some drama going on in their lives when I was 6. So I was constantly making up stories in my head, telling myself stories, writing down stories, to the point of, she's daydreaming in class notes, kind of things. So I guess I've always been a storyteller, but I don't know. It took a long time. I had been published a long time before I thought of myself as an author.
Okay. Well, so what was it? What sparked you to start writing with the intent of telling a story and sharing it with others?
Okay, I was early 30s, late 20s, early 30s, had two kids. They are 2 years apart, but they were 1 year apart in school, and they went to 2 different schools, 45 minutes apart. Neither one had bus service. To say that I was busy was a significant understatement. But remember that I always had stories. For most of my childhood, I always had these stories in my head, going on in my head. And then when I had my kids, that kind of stopped. I was just so focused on, kind of the having toddlers is a constant thing. And even early elementary was, I was involved, and I was, trying to figure out how I was going to get to one school and then get to the other one and get back again. And but while I was in the car one day going between the schools, Rainer started talking to me, and he starts telling me about Dan, and he starts telling me about Emily, and he tells me about his dad. And it got to the point that I couldn't think of anything else. And the more of the story that he told me, the more I wanted to know what was going to happen. But honestly, I sat down at my laptop one night and just started typing, because I was like, I've got to get this out of my head so I can go back to being a mom. Like, I don't have time for this. So I just started typing, and I think in the 2 or 3 hours that I was awake after we put the boys to bed, I'd probably typed 10,000 words, because the story was so built up in my head. And I went on like that for like maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks, where every single moment that I could possibly find a moment, I would write more story. I took my kids to like a McDonald's or Chick-fil-A, something that had a playground, I don't remember. And they were playing, and I took napkins from the restaurant and a pen and wrote story on the napkins. I couldn't get it out of my head. I thought I was going crazy. And after, a little while, I'm sure my husband noticed immediately, but he wasn't going to ask me about it immediately. But one Friday night, he took me out to dinner, and I think my parents had the kids, and he's like, so babe, what are you doing on your laptop all the time? And I am mortified, because again, I thought I was losing my mind. And so I was like, well, I'm writing this thing about these people that can hold balls of energy in their hands. And he's looking at me like, okay, the kids have finally pushed her over the edge. But which is what I thought he was going to say. But instead he said, can I read it? And I was like, oh, heavens, no, it's not even real. I was like, plus they have sex. And he said, you're aware that I'm the lucky guy that gets to have sex with you, right? And I was like, yeah, but this isn't about us. You can't read this. And he's like, I promise I'll be okay. Can I please read it? Well, I decided that because he loves me and he's a phenomenal human, I knew that even if he didn't like it, he would tell me that he did, because he wouldn't want me to be upset or wouldn't want me to feel like I hadn't done a good job. So I needed to know that whatever he told me was really what he felt. So I was like, okay, I'll read it to you. So I can I wanted to watch every facial expression, and so I started reading, and he really, really loved it. And every day when I would get to the end of what I had written that day, he'd be like, well, what's going to happen next? And I would be like, I don't know. I have to write tomorrow and see. And we went on like that for years, probably 2 years. And for months and months, he would beg me to publish it or to send it to a publisher or try to get published. And I would be like, no, this is just for me. I'm just doing this. And finally, he looked at me one night and he said, the world deserves to know these characters. Please, let's introduce the world to these people. And I couldn't argue with that. So that's how the first series was born.
What do you guys do now? Do you still read to him?
Sometimes, yeah, or he'll read it as I write it. Currently, I'm sort of in this kind of crazy cycle of editing one and getting another one ready and publishing another one. So I haven't written every single day in the past probably 6 months. But yeah, whenever I write something new, he reads it. So he's always the first beta reader.
Awesome. So you talked about, Dan kind of coming to you and talking to you. How do your characters lead you to what the story is?
Okay, so this is going to sound crazy. Rainer talked to me. Emily talked to me. Logan talked to me. Adeline will talk to me. Dan was mad. Dan didn't want anybody to know his story. He didn't want pity. He didn't want anything but this one goal, which was to kill this guy. And so the more Rainer talked to me, sort of, Dan finally was like, you know what, fine, because you're not gonna get it right. So I'm gonna have to tell you the story because I'm the only one that knows it. So he still has a little bit of that energy sometimes. But the more he told me and the more, Fiona kind of worked on him, the friendlier he got. But yeah, no, he would never have been the one to start the story, I don't think.
Okay.
It's just not in him.
And can you make any of them talk to you?
I try to be very, very respectful of my characters. They are very real to me. They're very in my heart, in my brain. So I don't like the idea of making anybody do anything. In this particular world, someone is always willing to talk to me. I have written other worlds, other series where it was this, struggle to get a character to talk. And I could not make them do it. But in this world, that is so born of me, someone's always willing to talk to me. It's also a massive cast, right? So there's a lot of people to talk. And if one of them doesn't want to, somebody else will fill in that part of the story. So
you just said this series is very born of you. Can you tell me what you mean? The way it came to me was so not the way a lot of people start writing, I don't think. I don't know. It is definitely what I wanted to read. It is my escape. If I had the option to escape anywhere from, the everyday crazy that we all live, the realm is where I want to go. So it is, it is my baby for sure. What makes the realm your refuge? What is it that's that space?
I think one of the things that I love the most about Star Trek is that it is our world a little bit evolved. And I think the realm is the same way. It is our world evolved. Just a little. They still struggle. They still have humanness about them. But that there's a kindness amongst the characters. There's obviously love, both romantic and non-romantic. And I tell people this all the time, I always want my readers to feel like Haydenshire Farm is there for them. They can go take a walk around the lake with the governor, and they can go eat dinner in Lillian's kitchen, and they can do the things that mean so much to me that I created. So I want it to be an escape for everyone that is looking for one.
It is a really huge family.
It is a huge family.
They're a large family and an active family.
Yes.
All are welcome.
So the Haydenshires, by the end of the series, have 11 kids. And one of the things that I love most about them is that they have 10 boys. Oh, no, sorry. They have 9 boys and 2 girls. One of the things that I love so much is that all of the boys are very distinctive. Like I can almost write you a dinner scene with the whole family and not tell you who's talking, and you can tell who's talking. So I love that about them, but that they all, for the most part, get along. And they are, because of some tragedy in their familial past, are pretty quick to forgive each other, even when they've done something annoying. I think the governor and Lillian are the parents we all, wish we had. Even though they too are very human, and Governor Haydenshire certainly has his moments of things he has to apologize for. But yeah, I think that it is a massive family. And we hear from a lot of them. We are in the heads of a lot of them. So I always enjoy that.
We got a lot of characters, as just pointed out. There's the large cast. How do you select character names?
A lot of times they come on page name. They tell me their name. Even though there's not any religious element to this series, I do think Dan kind of came from the Daniel and the Lion's Den story. He was saved by an angel. So that, I think he came from that. Actually, I can't remember who sings the song Daniel and the Den. But it was a song that I had been playing a lot. I loved the whole, metaphors used and stuff. So that probably is where Dan came from. Rainer and Emily both came to me named. Haydenshire, actually, like the first 3 times I typed it, it was Havenshire, Haven instead of Hay, and the entire family revolted. And we're like, that is not our name. So I changed that really quick. But for them, I would say 90% of the time they come on page named. To the point that occasionally my editors will be like, hey, I don't know if you noticed this, but you had this really, very one-mention secondary kind of character who's named this, and you've got a main character named this. They're never on page together, but if you want to know that, and I'll be like, I know, but that's their name. I can't change it.
Talking a bit more about writing, do you have a piece of writing advice?
I think write what you love. And, very much guard your creative self against people that want to tell you that there's only one way to write a book. No 2 authors do it exactly the same way. Everyone, because we are different people, so everyone's creativity is different and presents itself differently. And I think I would say really, really try to appreciate that time when it's just you and the book. you know, if this is your first novel, before you've got an audience, before people are reading it, before you're sharing it with the world, when there aren't expectations of you, enjoy that moment, because you can't ever have it back. And yeah, write the story you want to read, both because you're going to have to read it 50 times, and because I think readers can feel your passion in the book. So, even if it's never been done before, even if you don't know the rules of the genre or the subgenre or whatever, just, when it's just you in that book, write what's in your heart, and then you can worry about marketing it later, or worry about, who's going to read this later and where's the audience for it. Be respectful enough of the characters and the plot to give it its space to live and breathe before you start maybe, cramming it into a box that can be tricky.
We talked in the past, and you've mentioned being an intuitive writer, which follows everything we've talked about today. Very clearly, the characters came to you. You certainly didn't come to them with an outline, bullet points, and telling them what they will be doing.
No.
Really can't imagine Dan's face should you try to present him with a step-by-step plan of what he'll be doing for the next 3 chapters. But
he would say a lot of words that I will not say on this video. A lot of them.
But could you maybe tell me a bit about what it's like for you as an intuitive writer? What does that mean for you? How do you see that as an asset to your writing?
Okay, so I have always been this way. I don't know any other way to do it. So, I'm not, it just is the way it works for me. I love it. I love the discovery process of it. I love, that something that happened in book 1 of one series, we finally figure out why it happened, 12 books later. So for me, it's just the way that my brain works. But certainly, if you are a plot driven or a use an outline author, that's totally fine too. It's just not how my brain does it. I cannot tell the characters what to say. They tell me what they said. I think Anne Lamott said, that her characters just have really bad handwriting. And so she just writes the story down for them. And that's very much how I feel. I don't get to tell them what to do. I don't get to tell them what to say. I don't get to warn them about something that they're about to do that I know is not going to go over well. I just write down what they tell me.
Have you ever tried writing an outline and then writing off of it? Like what?
I can't. Somebody asked me to create a reverse outline, like a book that was already written, and I couldn't even do that.
Could you explain what a reverse outline is for anybody who might not
so you take a book that's already written, and then you go in and create the outline from what's written. So you tell all the bullet points, all the characters, within an outline after the book is written. I can't even do that. Like, my brain does not function in outline form. So no, and to me, it wouldn't be fun. It wouldn't be if it's already laid out on a piece of paper, what's the point of writing it? So I want those moments of discovery, and I want my characters to tell me what's going to happen next. And I want to not know. I want to be in it with them, because I feel like I get true emotional reactions from myself that I'm able to put on a page that I may not be able to recreate from a list of here's what needs to happen. But yeah, I wouldn't even know where to begin.
So, okay. Your characters put themselves through some rather harrowing things. How do you handle feeling all of that?
Okay, so if I know that there is a scene coming up that's going to be particularly harrowing, I have to write it through to the resolution, whatever the resolution is going to be. Even if the resolution is, there are parts in the first series that the resolution was almost as rough as the event that caused it. But I have to write through until I feel like we're back to steady. I cannot leave them in the middle of peril. So there have been lengthy scenes where I have gotten up at 5 a.m. and started writing and been up until past midnight to finish it because I can't leave them like that. So yeah, I have very, very much heart for these people that share their stories with me. And I don't enjoy them doing things that I know are not gonna be good for them, but also they're humans. And I am always aware of the arc that will come from the event. And I can see that that's actually the only way to get them from point A to point B. The only way out is through, kind of thing. But yeah, there are rough days.
Is that emotional resonance as pronounced when you do edits? Do you go through that in those additional passes? Because writing a book is not just writing the book, it's also editing the book and rereading the book and copy editing the book. And
so many times, yeah. There are scenes that I cried when I wrote it. I cry every time I read it in edits. I cry if I pick the book up off the shelf that's already, being sold. So yeah, that there are certain scenes that get me every single time. But I also think that's a lot of what people like about what I write. I think they like that emotional, all of those strings being played.
do you have a favorite scene that you've written?
Oh my gosh. I don't think I could pick a favorite. There are scenes I love any Vendigo family dinner, any Vendigo family dinner scene. I love the Sam scenes. There are several scenes coming up in Tangle of Magic, where people have asked me for a long, long time about things that happened prior to Energy of Magic starting that I finally get to share the story of in Tangle. So I like those scenes. But yeah, no, I don't think I could pick a favorite, but if I had to, it would be a Vendigo family dinner.
So being not only intuitive, but really emotionally connected with your story certainly could set you up for really long days as reference. So how do you battle burnout?
So I did burn out really, really badly in 2020. I was not writing this series though at the time. And those were dark days. Those were really dark days. On top of 2020 being everything that it was for everyone else. And I think that on some level I felt like it was irresponsible of me to escape what was going on in the real world. So instead I spent my time refreshing Twitter and the news channels and trying to, which was obviously not good. But I have not yet, and I don't even know how many books into this world I have written now, but well over 20. I have yet to burn out on this. That escape element is just always there for me. But I do try to be mindful. If I have gotten up at 5 and I've written past midnight, like the next day I may not write. I try really hard to honor that creative light in me. And try to strike a balance, which is really hard. But I also don't only write when I'm that when the muse strikes or whatever, I do sometimes, sometimes you sit down and work because you got to sit down and work. But yeah, I can, if I can't write in the world, I can reread, which will always, if I can get to the end of what I've already written, I can keep going. So you just learn little tricks like that. But again, I'm 20 something books in, so there's a lot of story there.
Do you have anything activities that help you kind of refill that creative well? If you're feeling like you're drained.
I love to read, obviously. I play a lot of Animal Crossing, which is just fun for me. I mean, I try to go for walks. I love to cook. I love to cook. So if my brain isn't can't figure something out and I want to, figure out whatever's coming next or whatever, I can go cook something. And usually in the back of my mind, I can figure out what I'm doing. But making a new recipe or whatever is massively fun for me. So I do a lot of that.
Okay. So on a normal day, not we need to write to get ourselves to the
All
end,
the way through.
dramatic. What's your writing routine like? What's your setup? What's your go-to? Must there be coffee?
I do get up pretty early, but I'm not ready to do things. Like my husband used to tell the boys, don't talk to mom yet. She's got to have another cup of coffee. But at least 2 cups of coffee in, then I can use real words and, communicate in sentences and stuff like that. I usually start writing, both of my kids are adults and moved out. So this is different than it would have been 10 years ago. But I'm able at this point to work an 8 to 5 usually, because of the current publishing schedule I'm on. I spend the majority of my workday right now editing, and then I will the writing is my reward at the end of the day. So I'll spend a couple of hours writing, or just whatever, just trying to get because we have multiple editing passes going on, and other books are with beta readers, and it's a lot of plates to keep in the air right now. But yeah, the writing is always the reward for me. So, I'll edit, 20 chapters and then I'll go write. But, I am much more flexible now than I could be when my kids were little and at home. When they were home from school, I couldn't really do it anymore. So I had to make those hours while they were at school count. I had to get something done. So I can be a little bit more relaxed with it now, but I have so much empathy for people who aren't there yet.
You talked about the characters kind of telling you their story and about knowing where the arc goes, but how far ahead do you think about in the story? Do you know where character arcs are going to end? Do you know kind of the path forward? How much of that story, because this world is huge. So
Yes.
do you have it in your mind, where the ball lands if we throw it?
Typically for the given series, I know I will have in my head a couple of scenes that I know are going to take place. And I will have the ending scene in mind. So I'm always writing to that ending scene. Sometimes it will take me just letting them talk for a little while, but I fairly quickly figure out, okay, I see where we're going to go. I also try to treat my characters like humans, which I don't think that humans necessarily arc on schedule. And because this is such a massive world, because there are so many books, and because these are reoccurring characters in different books, we can have some of an arc in one series, and then, maybe let those characters sort of sit in that, and while I'll let some other characters tell you about their arc, and then we go back and you see those characters arc even more. You see them grow up, which to me is really cool. I really like that. But it is very much an approach of, we can always work towards getting better. We can always, there's always another hill to climb kind of thing. Always another bad guy to take down. So yeah, I do enjoy the large cast and seeing them arc and occasionally seeing them stall out, because I think that's something that we do. The events of our lives, the trauma of our lives, sometimes, we don't get to where we would like to be as quickly as we'd like to be there.
With kind of that longer trajectory in mind, are there characters that you know about that we haven't read about?
So many characters. You'll meet several in Tangle. You'll meet more in the third series. Yeah. Okay. There's a female shield in the third series. That is very cool.
Exciting. Okay. So speaking of things that are fun to write, what scenes come the easiest for you?
Any heavy dialogue scene. I mean, I write a lot of love scenes. They are, for the most part, fairly easy for me to write. The high impact emotional scenes are both, I very much enjoy writing them, but they take a little bit of a toll. But funny scenes and I love dialogue is probably my favorite thing to write. So any heavy dialogue scene when they're bantering back and forth, they're harassing each other, or all the things that people do, those are fun, and I can write those pretty quickly.
So that sounds like most of the book. So what is most difficult? Because I feel like there's like one thing left.
So fight scenes are 100% my least favorite thing to write, and I have to just like dump them out of my head, and then they have to be edited so many times. I probably go back through them 15 times before any of my editors ever look at them. They're definitely the hardest thing I write for me.
So you have other scenes that are heavy action when you have like the summation.
Yeah.
So, well, one, can you kind of tell everybody what summation is and kind of how you came up with the idea? And then I'll ask more questions.
Okay. So summation is a game that gifted people play where they are moving forms of energy around a field to make something, to basically to convert potential energy into kinetic energy. So something occurs. In sort of my thoughts about this world, this is a world unto itself. It has its own government. It has its own police force. It has its own firefighters. It has its own schools. It has its own games. And so, I did like really consciously think about like, if you could do this, if you could move energy around and you could summon it into your hands and do things with it, what kind of game would you play with that? I mean, because I think that would be such a cool thing. And so summation came to me. It is fairly physics based, but you do not have to know anything about physics to read it. I just have to know about it to write it. But yeah, those are very fun for me to write, but they do require a tremendous amount of research. And my husband is very, very good at physics. My youngest son is very good at physics. And then my sister-in-law is a physicist. So I very often am like, okay, is this possible? And my youngest, when he got old enough that I could tell him about what was going on in the stories. I asked him about a physics law one time, and he's like, Mom, you cannot just break laws of physics. They're laws. So, I was like, well, I can do anything I want. I do try not to.
With an attitude like that, he's not getting invited to dinner at the Haydenshire farm.
That's right.
Okay, so that's kind of how you came up with summation. But one of the reasons I was going to ask is, I mean, fight scenes are very action oriented and require understanding where people are, kind of the blocking components, which definitely still summation's it's a team sport, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
there's a lot of that kind of
Positioning.
interplay. Is it that it's not heavy emotionally taxing to write?
It's when they're challenging, when they're having summation challenges, they're having fun.
Mm-hmm.
So I can write fun. When you're in a fight scene, that isn't so fun for them. So that's hard for me. Yeah, summation is there's 12 people on the field generally at one time moving energy around. And so, yeah, there is, but it is a similar blocking kind of positioning where the players are and what they're supposed to do and all of that is similar to writing a fight scene for sure. But yeah, it's strictly the emotion of what's going on at the time of either event occurring.
Is there anything that you hope that people take away from your books?
I mean, it's that escape thing. Like I just would love to give people those moments of escape. I had I got an email from a fan that told me that she was reading them while she was in the hospital and how much they had helped. And I've gotten emails about people who've read them while they're having chemo done. And, that just means the world to me. That's what I want. That's what I want this world to be. And I feel like, and I started writing it in the heyday of post-apocalyptic fiction. And I was so like, I don't want to read that. I don't want to think about that. I want it to be a good, what if the world was better? What if it got better? The same thing about Star Trek. So that was very much in my head when I started writing it. What if you could exist in a place where you weren't necessarily terrified at every turn, even though there was extreme danger. What if it was really more of a tug of war back and forth between good and evil? So I think that is what I want to give the world, is that escape from everyday monotony and instability and insecurity and all the things that are always going to be here. But maybe for a minute you could take a breath.
It's like they're their own personal shields.
Yes, exactly.
How did you come up with the idea of the shields? We talked about some, the world, but how did the idea of a shield develop for you?
Okay, I mean, who wouldn't want that, right? Like, so they can project. There are certain members of gifted society that can project energy out from their bodies and encapsulate either themselves or someone else or a group of someone else's in an impenetrable force field or a shield. And for the receivers who exist in the world of emotion and in emotional energy, and they feel it constantly, whether or not they want to or not, when they are inside of a shield, for the most part, given the character, they don't have to feel that, which allows them to recover. But yeah, I think that the shields are able to create this sort of safe space, which is very much what I tried to create with the whole thing. So they were a very integral part of it. And I think on page 1 of book 1, Rainer casts a shield. So it is right there from the beginning.
Who's stronger, a shield or a receiver?
So, I mean, ultimately the receivers are stronger, but they are always better together. But yeah, ultimately, as Dan tells us, emotion rules the world. So they are stronger.
So I feel like people who have read the series would say, I would be remiss if I did not bring up and ask about how they're better together. And how their magic is intrinsic to those love scenes.
Well, like I said, they can see the energy. They can see the energy your body is projecting, or the emotional energy that you are feeling. So, I think there's a scene, and this is a little bit of I guess a teaser. I think there's a scene in the first book of Tangle, which comes out soon, where Dan is walking down a hallway with a bunch of gifted people, and he sees all of the colors. The entire hall length of this hallway are all of these gifted people that all have energy of themselves emitting from them. So that's how the world looks to them. But there's a lot of emotional energy, there's a lot of sexual energy in having sex. So they can both harness from that and draw that out and sort of amplify the pleasure of their partner using that, which makes writing love scenes a lot of fun. And very cool. So yeah, that's always fun. And yeah, I will say one of my favorite scenes is the first time that Dan and Fiona sleep together, and what he notices and learns from without her having to say anything. So that is fun. But yeah, love scenes they're a ball.
So what do you, well, I think you kind of told us what you love about Shield. What do you love about Receivers?
I mean, one of the things that I love about Shields is how they are a little bit over the top. Like, their entire being, for the most part, is focused on safety, keeping her safe, or keeping their partner safe. And so sometimes they are just completely over the top. And I love that the Receivers, who are often the object of a Shield's love, will be like, okay, sweetheart. But I mean, they are so able to really make us think about why people do things, why they do the things they do. What are they feeling when they did this thing? And I just think that's a really interesting aspect of the world, because I feel like a lot of times we're asking ourselves, why did they do that? Why would you say that? Why did you do, and a receiver can generally tell you what they were feeling when they did that. So I love that element of it. And their ability to, if someone is hurting, to repair that for a little bit, cautiously, but to take, there are things in life that happen that aren't necessarily recoverable from, but having a reprieve from them would be nice. And a receiver can give you that. So I like that too.
Absolutely. So these are some really jet set books. We travel all over. Are there any favorite locations that we spend time in the book?
Oh gosh, I mean, we lived in Kauai for a while, and there's a significant portion of the books take place in Kauai in the first series, in all the series actually. So that is definitely my favorite place, probably on the planet. I have been, other than I have never run from the border guards at in Moscow, not done that. I have been everywhere that I wrote about except for Sydney, which I would love to go sometime. But that I had to call on friends to describe for me and do research for. But I love to travel, so that definitely comes out in the books. And the world is built so that there are gifted people all over the world, and so I think it's kind of fun to get to see the differences. And the same way it's the same way it's fun for us to travel. So yeah, I do love that, and that definitely is at play throughout all of the books. So,
are there any places that you're excited to add in some of the future books that we haven't been to yet?
There's a scene in Tangle where a couple of them go to London. We are back in Kauai a fair amount. Tangle really is a transitional series. It's not quite as violent maybe as the first series. So that one it's also a shorter series. So there's a little bit less travel in that one. The third series will be back to go in lots of places. But I think, London makes an appearance. I believe in the third series, Tokyo is likely to make an appearance. Rio, the third series, we go to Rio. So Brazil makes, there's a significant portion of story there. So that's, I'm very excited to write it all.
There are, and you mentioned it earlier, so there are these little tidbits that you'll drop early in the series, early in like first book, that don't seem like they're a super important thing. It's just like texture. And then you get to the end of the book, or into the series that is, and you'll go, oh wait, that was the thing from back there. So which one? Thanks for that. But also, do you know that when you open that door, how you're going to, that it's significant?
Not
always going to happen?
Not always. Sometimes, like the first book has been out for a while, so we'll talk about it. But there's the scene where Rainer and Logan are going to redo the guest house, and all the Haydenshire brothers come over to help. And Will shows up looking like he's already been hard at manual labor work. And my editors were even like, why is he already dirty? What is he, what is going on here? You never told us. And I'm like, oh, but I'll tell you. I knew why Will looked that way, but I don't tell you why Will looked that way until Tangle. But so sometimes I do know what caused it, but I don't know, I don't add it in yet. I don't tell you yet, largely because we were in Rainer's head. Had we been in Will's head, he could have told you, but Rainer can only tell you what Rainer knows. So, until we get to a perspective or a point of view where the person can tell you what they know, I can't add that to the page. But sometimes my characters will start talking about something, and I'll be like, why are you telling me? What are we? But I try really hard to just trust them. In probably the first or second book of the third series, Dan dives into this in-depth memory series about another shield that we all know and love. And it was I didn't know any of the backstory that Dan provided us. And I was like, okay, that's terrifying. And why this is not about him. This is not about you. But 3 books later, I figured out why I needed to know that there. So I try really hard to just go with it and let them tell me, even if I have no idea. But that's part of what I love about being a discovery writer is I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, I get it. Those moments make it fun for me.
Okay, I have some reader questions to ask. So, if anybody is watching who has not read any of the series yet, just do your best. Do your best here. So, people want to know, will we ever find out what happened to Cal?
Yes.
Is that a yes, we're going to have to wait, or a yes, soon?
You will find out in Tangled. Garrett Haydenshire is one of the primary narrators for Tangle of Magic. Garrett tells you what happened to Cal and a lot of things that we don't yet know. Will you ever see the scene of what happened to Cal, like from Cal's perspective? No. But you do find out why it happened and how it happened.
Will we ever find out what happened to Governor Lawson in detail?
So Raynor's dad. Possibly in the 4th series, maybe, but I doubt it would be in extreme detail. One, because this is Raynor's story, this is Dan's story, this is not Governor Lawson's story. 2, because Raynor can only know what Raynor knows. And all of the American gifted realm has done what they really can to protect Raynor, to shield the shield a little bit. So if he doesn't know, he can't tell you. So if and when we find out more about what happened to Governor Lawson, it would also mean that Raynor would have to find that out. So I will have to see how he tells the story.
That almost answers the next question, which is, will Raynor ever take back over as primary narrator?
Yes, but not till the 4th series.
So eventually we get Raynor back. Gotcha.
You get Raynor back, yeah.
All right.
Well, a little bit grown up, a little bit different. Yeah.
I'm here for that.
Yeah.
Are Garrett and Chloe going to get married?
No. But
that was a real finite answer. These other ones you've been like, I don't know if I'm going to tell you, you're just flat out not going to happen. No.
No, that will not happen. But Mr. Playboy Haydenshire does get married. And that is a real fun part of the next series.
Will any of the other Haydenshire children get stories?
Levi has his own book that will be coming out at some point. Will Haydenshire takes over as he doesn't have his own book, but he takes over as one of the primary narrators in the 3rd series. So you get a lot of Will. You get a lot of Connor in Levi's book. You hear a lot from Connor about Connor. Patrick and Lucy's stories play out, as secondary characters throughout the first 2 series. We will certainly see them appear in the 3rd series on occasion. So you do get more Haydenshires, but they don't all necessarily have a book.
Will other members of the elite squadron become primary narrators?
Yes.
Who? Is it a secret? You could say it's a secret, but if it's not a secret, you can also tell us.
Well, it's not a secret, but it's not going to happen for a while. So, but Landon Portwood takes over as primary narrator for quite a bit of the 3rd series. And that is also fun.
Okay, we've got one more of the questions from readers, which is, will you ever advance far in the future and write about Keaton and Henry or Abigail?
So the youngest Haydenshires. I mean, maybe. I doubt I would advance. I doubt I would just skip decades of life and write them. But if I get my choice, I'll be writing this for the next 30 years. So absolutely, maybe. Keaton and Henry would be fun to write.
Okay.
You do see a lot of Abigail, and you see her development, and a lot of cool, she does a lot of cool, she's, you know, the most gifted child there's ever been, right? So you see a lot of her in the coming series too, but she is still a baby, so.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about kind of what's next. Well, one, like, are you reading anything good right now? Do you have any book recs for us?
I just started Secret Service of Tea and Treason, India Holton's new book. I just started it, but she is so fabulous. I love her so much. I love that whole Wisteria Lane series. So I just started that. A friend of mine just told me I had to read T.S. Joyce, who I've never read before. So that's on, you know, I got to do that, I guess.
Can you read in the genre that you write?
It depends. So like India, you know, that she writes historical fantasy. These are, you know, witches and pirates. So that's very, very different from what I'm writing. So and our voices are very different. Probably wouldn't dive into anything that felt too close to my work. I read historical romance is probably my favorite, and I read that all the time, and certainly will never write one. So
you already have to research physics. I don't know if you want to be.
The physics is enough. Yes. But no, historical romance is probably most of the time I go to. So that's very, very different from writing about people who can summon energies.
So what are you writing right now? I mean, you've talked a bit about what's going to happen in the third series and the fourth. Where are you at in the process?
So currently, books 2 and 3 of Tangle are with my editors. I am adding scenes into books 5 and 6 of Tangle. I am writing book 5 of the third series. So that's new content, like the new content I'm working on is in book 5. There's still a lot of the third series left to tell. I'm thinking there'll be at least 2 or 3 more books worth of story. I am already in my head thinking about the 4th series though, and I've got a lot of scenes playing out in my head. So still lots to come.
Okay. So what is next for the world of Energy of Magic? So you've got Energy of Magic, which is 9 books that's out right now. You mentioned Tangle. Is that next? What is that?
Tangle is next. It is a continuation of Energy of Magic. There is a brief period of time between, very, very brief, between the close of book 9 and the opening of book 1 of Tangle of Magic. It is a 6-book series, and I believe we are going to drop them all on one day, which will be very fun.
Very fun.
So, you know, you can binge and escape for, you know, throughout 600,000 words.
If I were somebody who had read The Gifted Realm, which is kind of like the precursor to Energy of Magic.
Right.
I would not have seen anything from Tangle though.
Yeah.
Tangle's
entirely new. No, it is.
Can you kind of tell me like where we start for Tangle? Like where we at?
Okay, so you know, a couple of spoilers from Energy of Magic, but at the end of Energy of Magic, we learned that Dan has stepped down from Chief of Elite IADX. He's taking a position as the head of IADX, the head of ISCs, the head of the Shields, basically, at Vinton Academy, which is the gifted school in DC or near DC. And the first day he arrives on campus, he discovers that there's a lot of things going on at Vinton that aren't what should be going on at Vinton. And his father, Governor Vendigo, is the governor of education, and his dad is coming under fire for all of the mishaps going on at Vinton. And Dan tries very, very hard to shield his dad from all of this. So he steps in as detective. He's basically an undercover detective pretending to be a teacher. And it's a wild ride, but yeah, so we get Dan and Fiona through that. As if you've read the first series, you know, Fiona is pregnant at the end of the first one, and so she does have the baby in Tangle. So we get to see Dan Vendigo with the newborn, which is, you know, that's always fun. And then, like I said, Garrett Haydenshire takes over as primary narrator in the middle of the series. So that's also fun.
Okay, so if you're going to be dropping 6 books all at once, I would like to know when that happens. What's the best way for me to know that when that's going to happen?
So sign up for my newsletter. That's where they get all the good stuff. They get extra scenes that you can't get anywhere else. They get all the first announcements of everything. Newsletter at jillianneal.com. But yeah, that's definitely, and then follow me on Instagram. But yeah, that is the place, and they get all the good things.
All right. Well, I think you've answered all my questions.
Well, thank you for doing this.